The Israeli military launched its long-awaited operation in Gaza City. 500,000 people flee the city as massive airstrikes are reported throughout the entire region. Meanwhile, Hamas stated that it has moved Israeli hostages into the line of fire in Gaza City, and Qatar has demanded an official apology from Israel in order to resume its role mediating the negotiations. On the diplomatic front, dozens of countries are preparing to recognize a Palestinian state at the UN General Assembly, and this comes days after a UN committee finds Israel guilty of genocide crimes in the Gaza Strip. You're watching the Israel-Palestine Report with Professor Alon Burstein. Hit that subscribe button. Let's dive in. On Monday, September 15th, the Israeli military launched its operation to take over the southern areas of Gaza City. This operation, which has been termed by the IDF Gideon's Chariots B, is aimed to take over the southern parts of Gaza City. This is the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, specifically the areas of Zaytun, Tel al-Halwa, and Sheikh Hajalin on the eastern parts of Gaza City, as well as the neighborhoods of Salahadin in the southern parts and all of those surrounding areas. Nearly 1 million Palestinians have returned to those areas since the ceasefire between the sides in January of 2025. And also throughout 2025, Hamas has rebuilt its strength in that region. The IDF reportedly assumes that there are about 7,500 militants that are held up in Gaza City, 5,000 of them belonging to Hamas's Al-Qassam brigades, and 2,500 belonging to the Palestinian Islamic Jihad's Al-Quds brigades. Leading up to this invasion, and despite ongoing reports in Israel that the military is hesitant to carry out this invasion without a day-after plan, the IDF has been calling on Palestinian civilians to evacuate these regions over the past weeks, and these reports became a full sweeping evacuation order that was issued on September 12th, leading to between 200,000 to 250,000 Palestinians evacuating those areas towards the southern parts of the Gaza Strip in these areas over here. So, what has happened in the Gaza Strip over the past week, and where do things stand? Already on Sunday, there were reports of substantial increase in the Israeli military's airstrikes in the areas of Gaza City, with the IDF itself stating that it targeted 4 high-rise buildings that Hamas had reportedly been using for different militant purposes. Massive airstrikes were reported in the Ramallah regions in the northeastern parts of Gaza City as well. And later in the day, a major bombing was reported in one of the buildings that belonged to the Islamic University, also in the areas of Gaza City. Israel's defense minister Israel Katz tweeted a picture of the university's bombing, stating in that picture in Hebrew, and I quote, "The Islamic University in Gaza is rising up to the heavens. We will annihilate the sources of incitement and terrorism," end quote. Alongside this, the IDF also reported targeting a tunnel array in the Jabalia refugee camp in the areas of northern Gaza, later locating at least 11 armed operatives in that tunnel. Again, that all happened at the beginning of the week on September 14th. On September 15th, there was a significant increase in the airstrikes and artillery bombings in that area, with massive explosions being reported in the areas of Sabra, Darj Tufah, Sheikh Radwan, Al-Shati refugee camp, Tel al-Halwa, and lots of other areas in Gaza City. Palestinian sources also reported that the Israeli military revived a practice of using older armored personnel vehicles as mobile bombs, so to speak, packing them full with explosives and using them to detonate a massive amount of explosives near buildings that are suspected to be booby-trapped, all in the areas of Gaza City. Again, this is the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. Both the Israeli military and Palestinian sources reported that leaflets were dropped throughout the areas of northern Gaza, calling on Palestinians to immediately evacuate southward. And by September 16th, the IDF officially announced the initiation of the ground offensive. The Israeli military stated that this operation, Gideon's Chariots B, is going to be a staged invasion with maximum initial firepower before ground forces move into the Palestinian areas, and that the operation is due to take several months due to adhering to the principle of the troops' safety being more important than the speed of the attack. By the evening of September 16th, Israel had reportedly carried out over 140 massive airstrikes in the areas of northern Gaza, and these bombings, alongside the beginning of the ground troops' invasion into the city, also led to a massive fleeing and evacuation of Palestinian civilians. The Israeli military issued an announcement in response to this mass evacuation that the Salah Hadin road, that is this road that goes in the central parts of the Gaza Strip, will also be open for 48 hours for Palestinians to evacuate through those areas. And Al Jazeera reported that tens of thousands of people were seen traveling by vehicle and on foot to the central and southern parts of the Gaza Strip, again fleeing that massive intensification of fighting that is happening in northern Gaza. The intense bombing campaign continued on Wednesday, with the Israeli military reporting that it targeted Al-Qassam operatives and weapons manufacturing structures in Gaza City. In turn, Palestinian sources reported that on that day, attacks targeted civilians attempting to evacuate the Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza City. Another report stated that the Al-Rantisi Children's Hospital in Gaza City was also hit by a bombing. This is one of the pictures that was disseminated from that hospital. Intensive ground fighting in the area was also reported by Palestinian sources on September 19th. And by Saturday, the Israeli military reported that over 70,000 IDF troops are being mobilized into the region, and that nearly 50% of the Palestinian population in northern Gaza, some 500,000 people, have already evacuated southward. Again, that means that about 500,000 Palestinians have again become internally displaced and have evacuated towards southern Gaza, while still another roughly 500,000 Palestinians remain in the fighting area in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip in Gaza City. In addition, alongside these major escalations in northern Gaza, fighting was also reported throughout the week in the southern and central parts of the Gaza Strip. Among others, Al Jazeera reported gun battles that broke out in Rafah, that is in the southern parts of Gaza, on September 14th, reportedly resulting in 4 Palestinians being killed near an aid distribution site. In addition, on September 16th, the Al-Qassam brigades reported the joint attack that was carried out with the Al-Mujahideen brigades, that is another Palestinian faction in the Gaza Strip, reportedly targeting IDF troops in the areas of Han Yunis with rockets. The most intensive fighting in southern Gaza was reported on September 18th in Rafah. 3 different gun battles were reported in the Janina neighborhood, that is in the most southern tip of Rafah over here. And after those 3 different gun battles, these were followed by an IDF vehicle driving over an explosive device that detonated, killing 4 IDF soldiers and injuring 3 more. Some reports also suggested this was an ambush by the Al-Qassam brigades, and that it also reported sniper fire after the vehicle had detonated. Regarding casualties, 4 IDF soldiers were reported killed in the Gaza Strip over the past week, bringing the total number of IDF soldiers killed in Gaza since the invasion began to 464, and 2,898 soldiers reportedly injured in the Gaza Strip. The Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza, in turn, reported that 405 Palestinians were killed in the Strip over the past week, bringing the total number of Palestinians killed in Gaza since the war began to 65,208, and 166,271 Palestinians reported injured. I remind everyone once again that the Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip does not distinguish between militants and civilians. It simply reports the entire number of Palestinians that have been cataloged in hospitals in the Gaza Strip as being killed in the war. According to some reports in Israel estimates that between 17,000 and 20,000 militants have been killed in the Gaza Strip since the war began. But again, those are estimates from the IDF, while in turn, Palestinian Health Ministry is reporting the entire number of Palestinians killed in the Gaza Strip since the war began. Summarizing the fighting in the Gaza Strip over the past week, that major invasion of Gaza City has reportedly begun with a massive bombing campaign in northern Gaza. This has led to some additional 250,000 Palestinians evacuating the areas of northern Gaza and traveling southward. At this point, we can expect that intensive bombing in northern Gaza is going to increase as the IDF prepares its ground invasion of Gaza City. Turning from this to the hostage situation, leading up to the invasion of Gaza City, Hamas had published a hostage video at the beginning of September, with the hostage stating that hostages are going to be moved into Gaza City in order to circumvent the IDF invasion of that area. Reports that Hamas was doing this were accumulated over the past week. On September 15th, Palestinian sources reported that Israeli hostages had been moved to the surface in Gaza City and dispersed among apartments and tents in the area. And 2 days later, more rumors were circulated in the Saudi Al Hadith, also stating that Hamas is beginning to bring hostages to the areas of Gaza City in order to stop or at least complicate the IDF invasion. On September 18th, Hamas officially announced that the remaining Israeli hostages have been scattered around Gaza City, adding that the expansion of the Israeli military's activity will result in none of these hostages returning alive. The group escalated this rhetoric further on September 20th, publishing a collage of all the hostages' pictures and labeling each one of them as Ron Arad number 2, Ron Arad number 3, etc., all this referring to the Israeli IDF soldier Ron Arad, who had been captured in Lebanon and never returned, never heard from again. In that collage, Ron Arad's picture also appears, and every other hostage is labeled Ron Arad 2, 3, 4, etc. The saying above the collage refers to Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and the IDF Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir, stating both in Hebrew and in Arabic, due to Netanyahu's refusal and Zamir's succumbing to the operation in Gaza City, these pictures of the hostages should be seen as farewell pictures from the hostages that will not be returned alive. Responding to these developments on September 15th, US President Trump issued a message saying that Hamas's use of hostages as human shields is a, quote, human atrocity, the likes of which few people have ever seen before, end quote. He added that he hopes that Hamas's leaders know what they're getting themselves into and that they should not let this happen, stating in capitals that if they do, all bets are off. In Israel, the government reportedly held a meeting on September 14th to discuss a retaliation option in the event that Hamas executes hostages during the invasion of Gaza City. In addition, amidst Hamas's announcements that it is dispersing hostages throughout Gaza City, on September 16th, it was reported that the IDF has defined specific areas in Gaza City where there is a fear that hostages might be held, and that in those areas the military has been instructed to use extreme and unusual coordination and caution when opening fire, and even if armed Palestinian operatives are identified, the Israeli troops are ordered to not open fire immediately, all with the aim of limiting the risks to the live Israeli hostages. With regards to the hostage negotiations, despite the U.S. efforts to resume negotiations and bring Qatar back to the table as a mediator, all talks between the sides have been frozen since Israel's failed assassination attempt of Hamas's leadership in Qatar on September 9th. On September 20th, Israel's N12 news channel reported that Qatar is demanding an official Israeli apology for that assassination attempt, and that this is a precondition to resuming its role as a negotiator in the war, and that Qatar has refused to meet with any Israeli delegates until that demand for an apology is met. Some sources suggested that the United States is now negotiating with Qatar about the wording of that apology in order to come up with a formula that will satisfy Qatar on the one hand, and it will also be acceptable to the Israeli government on the other. As things stand, however, at this time, there are no talks happening between the sides regarding either a hostage deal or a possible truce and a ceasefire. Before I conclude, there are also a couple of important diplomatic developments that have occurred in the last week that relate to the conflict that I just want to highlight, and these are things both that have occurred in the last week and also things that are expected to happen in the coming week. The first is a report that was submitted by the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the occupied Palestinian territories, East Jerusalem, and Israel. This is a subcommittee that was appointed by the UN Human Rights Council in 2021 to investigate the Israeli-Palestinian arena for violations of international humanitarian law. This past week, on September 16th, the Commission submitted a report analyzing evidence that was collected by previous fact-finding missions regarding the war in Gaza, and in that report the Commission concludes that Israel has committed acts of genocide in the Gaza Strip. Now, it's important to note that Israel had refused to cooperate with the Commission's fact-finding missions that had come in the last several months, and had stated that they are completely biased and it is essentially a farce. And thus the Commission also acknowledges that the evidence that it is basing on relies heavily on Palestinian reports and public Israeli records, but not on cooperation from the Israeli government or on reports from the IDF itself. Now, I'm not going to get into analyzing the specific allegations in this 72-page document. I will try to possibly upload a video focusing on that in the upcoming week. But I will say that on the diplomatic side, this report is, on the one hand, an independent commission, so it is not an official UN position yet. However, it is going to be submitted to the United Nations in the coming week, and if it is formally accepted that Israel is committing a genocide in Gaza, this itself could have substantial diplomatic repercussions. Again, I will try to upload a video focusing specifically on this in the coming week. Alongside this, a second important upcoming diplomatic event is the UN General Assembly meeting in the upcoming week. Following the approval of the French-Saudi resolution that called for a two-state resolution to the conflict on September 12th, an increasing number of states have announced that they are going to recognize a Palestinian state in this coming meeting. These include, just for the past week, the United Kingdom, Luxembourg, and Portugal. While within the General Assembly this is seen as more nominal support, without actual meaning, if the General Assembly votes to recognize a Palestinian state, that does not mean the United Nations officially does so. This has to happen through the Security Council. However, this itself could end up having much larger implications, both in the United Nations, but also within these different countries. If a country recognizes the state of Palestine, then it, by definition, recognizes that that state is under occupation from Israel, which could have implications for trade agreements and other things between said country and Israel. Again, if you're interested in more details about this, feel free to check out my latest interview on my channel. I uploaded this on September 17th, where I go into what could be some of the diplomatic implications of these recognitions. That concludes my latest highlight in the Israel-Palestine Report. If you find these reports informative, please do remember to send them out to anyone who you think might be interested in them. Hit that like button, subscribe, turn on notifications so you wouldn't know when these reports come out. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I'm Alon Burstein. I'm a visiting assistant professor and Israel Institute fellow in the Department of Political Science at Tufts University. Thanks for watching.